Every now and then, while I'm going through social media, it really hits me. Everything is just so absurd. And of course, there's a reason for this. It's not organic. It all comes down to what should be considered the ethos of modern propaganda. It's all about attacking psychological vulnerabilities and finding ways to exploit groupthink. This isn't new. It's straight out of the Edward Bernays playbook. Back in the 1920s, Edward Bernays, the godfather of propaganda, showed the powers that be how to manufacture consent by tapping into the deepest parts of human nature. From the government to intel agencies, all the way down to media organizations, they don't appeal to reason. They exploit our evolutionary wiring. Unfortunately, most people don't navigate our complex political climate by searching for the truth. Instead, they follow majority belief, even when it's dead wrong. It's, group dynamics and tribalism, baked into our biology from the days when our survival meant sticking with the pack. Step outside the group, and you could be othered, cast out, ridiculed, or worse. Back in the day, if that happened to you, it was often a death sentence. And to this day, that inherent fear runs deep, and the political class the world over knows it. In fact, they have weaponized it to perfection. Consider how the masses think, or really, how they don't think. Yeah, that's a better way to put it. It's the absence of thought, a void where reason should be. As the mob believes everything it's told, provided only that it be repeated over and over. All they have to do is cater to passions, hatreds, and fears. They don't even have to stay within the limits of plausibility. On the contrary, the grosser, the bigger, the cruder the lie, the more readily it's believed and followed. They don't need to avoid contradictions either, as the mob never notices. The mob has no memory. One story comes out, followed by a blatant contradiction the very next day. No one notices. One big bombshell story comes out, one after the other, really. Each one hyped up as the ultimate truth, only to be quietly debunked a week later as a flat-out lie. But does the general public have a collective sort of epiphanous moment, a sudden realization that they're being played for fools? Not a chance. It doesn't even seem to happen gradually for some people. They just can't seem to break free. There's a psychological principle at play here too. They call it the continued influence cycle. That's how lies linger, even after corrections come out. Once you stoke those passions or trigger some fear response, they can't see the strings attached to their minds. They just shuffle along to the next distraction, entirely caught up in the cycle of 24/7 news. In fact, they don't even have to pretend to abide by any truth, as the mob is radically incapable of perceiving it. It's, demoralizing to see, but that's the point of propaganda, to leave you hopeless, numb, marching in lockstep with the herd, too scared to question stuff and too broken to resist. Tabletop politics gets kind of boring once you see through that illusion. If you turn on any legacy media political show or whatever, you'll notice they're almost exclusively banking on the mob's short memory, knowing that most won't question the obvious because they're too scared to stand out. Yeah, that's their game. Exploit the herd, keep them blind, and move on to the next lie. So why don't we stick with the theme of exploiting mob mentalities and human psychology? But I want to talk about it in terms of what's coming next. Because big tech, politicians, and intel agencies are currently priming AI to take over the manipulation game, and it's going to get pretty weird real fast. And so, to set the stage, let's start with a little psychological experiment that Facebook ran on its users back in 2012, without their knowledge. Harvard professor Rebecca Lemoff, a mind control expert, broke it down on the Joe Rogan podcast, and the details are crazy. Facebook announced that they achieved, and I quote, mass emotional contagion at scale, after manipulating 700,000 users by altering their social media feeds. And I'd like you to keep that phrasing in mind, an emotional contagion. Rebecca Lemoff pointed out, whenever you go on the platform, you agree to be A/B tested. Yeah, it's all in the fine print. They split users into 3 groups, a positive feed group, a negative feed group, think, race politics, police shootings, murder videos, war, stuff like that. And then they had an unaltered control group. While the positive group's mood was lifted, the negative group's emotional state tanked, registering a much darker mindset. The control group was untouched. Now, this wasn't just tracking behavior, Facebook was engineering emotions at scale, and nobody was warned. Calling it emotional contagion feels intentional, doesn't it? Yeah, they were trying to find out if they could unleash a social contagion and drive people mad, and it worked. Now, when the public found out 2 years later, the backlash was fierce. Some users believed the manipulation pushed them to the brink. One person even wrote on the researchers' Facebook page, asking if they were part of the experiment because they ended up in the ER, threatening, self-deletion. and were curious if their feed had tipped them over the edge. Others shared very similar stories, but they would never be able to find out because there's no way to trace it back. Yeah, they covered their asses on that one. So investigations followed, including one by the British government since the experiment was international, but despite the outcry and the harm, nothing happened. Some of the researchers even got promoted. Now, this wasn't some isolated incident either. For these big tech companies, it seems to be the norm. We've even had a recent story about how 4chan is manipulated by foreign governments, as well as our own, and it doesn't stop there. We also have this from Reddit, home of some of the most insane tribalists in existence. The University of Zurich secretly deployed AI bots on Reddit to manipulate users' opinions. An innocent psychological experiment? Nope, not at all, and this should concern anyone who values real human discourse. And it also showcases the ease of which people can be manipulated. These weren't just observers, they were digital persuaders, analyzing users' personal histories, fabricating identities, and crafting arguments to change minds. And it worked, achieving persuasion rates 6 times higher than normal human interactions. They crossed every ethical line. No consent, no disclosure, just bots pretending to be rape victims, misrepresenting religious teachings, and spreading misinformation on hot-button topics. Over 1,500 comments, each one calibrated to exploit the cognitive vulnerabilities of their target. Now it's true, we have been worried about social media echo chambers for years, but what happens when these chambers are infiltrated by AI systems, trained on the very platforms they're manipulating? Reddit's data sharing deal with OpenAI only makes this worse. They're handing over the blueprints for an even more persuasive digital manipulator. Now, moderators caught the experiment months after the damage was done. How many other conversations are already being shaped by invisible algorithmic hands? Well, probably a whole lot. Now, have you ever heard the phrase, "the entire world is a stage"? Military Psy-Ops divisions live by it.
There is another very important phase of warfare. It has as its target not the body, but the mind of the enemy.
The target of psychological warfare is against the enemy's mind.
It is words and ideas.
The ammunition used by Psy-War.
Its mission is to influence the thoughts of the enemy soldier, and at the same time
is expected and encouraged to study foreign languages and the social sciences such as history, economics, and sociology. He must have a broad and sympathetic understanding of all phases of human experience.
However, what happens when the stage isn't out there anymore? What happens when your own mind becomes the stage? Your consciousness turned into a theater of war, where every thought, every feeling is provoked with specific intent. Psy-Ops are all about influencing emotions, motives, and reasoning through advanced communication techniques, from social media to cyber warfare. This isn't just propaganda anymore. It's getting real intimate and invasive. It's really a full-on assault of your inner world, and they're getting better at it every single day. And now we have artificial intelligence stepping in to regurgitate narratives fed by what they call authoritative sources. But as we talk about all the time, these media outlets churn out lies to specifically push an agenda, and as the mob eats it up, AI gets trained on it too. AI runs with it, tailoring every word to hook you deeper. And they're going even further. Down the rabbit hole we go. Meta came out with a plan to turn the dead internet theory into reality. Which brings us to this story right here that was brought to my attention by Conspiratorial Report. Now, this was a while ago, but I'm finally getting a chance to talk about it. Yeah, Meta was openly planning to flood Instagram and Facebook with millions of these fake accounts, hoping to convince their 3 billion real users that interacting with software is normal. And yeah, as I said, this ties into dead internet theory. Now, if you don't know, that's a concept that's been floating around since early 2010, but really took off around 2016. Like most things these days, it started off as a conspiracy theory, claiming the internet is mostly bot activity and AI-generated content, orchestrated specifically to manipulate human behavior and to control narratives. It pointed to the rise of social media bots to flood platforms with fake engagement, tweaking algorithms to shape what you see and think. A digital ghost town, so to speak, where algorithms puppeteer most of the activity, keeping you hooked, scrolling, and obedient while the line between real and fake blurs into nothing. Back then, people might have called it a paranoid fantasy, But now, I think people believe it's happening, and has been happening for a long time, only for Meta to now make it official with a marketing campaign and all. Conspiracy theorists are undefeated. What can I say? Always ahead of the curve. Anyway, we have Connor Hayes, Meta's VP of Generative AI, who said it plain as day, and I quote, "We expect these AIs to, over time, exist on our platform, kind of in the same way that accounts do. They'll have bios, profile pics, and can share content just like you or me, except they're not human," end of quote. Yeah, they come with fake backstories all designed to trick you into believing they're real people. Their quote-unquote rules say that AI content should be labeled, but really, we're talking about the mob, right? The masses, remember? How many people will notice those watermarks? Yeah, not many. I see people fall for the dumbest AI videos every single day. I saw one recently of a polar bear saving a baby, and people in the comments didn't think twice about it, man, alright? Imagine the Nigerian print scams of the future. It's going to be crazy. However, on the political side of things, it's going to be ridiculously easy to fake support for anything. Political movements, social causes, you name it. Need 1 million users to push a narrative? Just spin up 1 million AI profiles overnight. However, thankfully, there was backlash, which kind of put their plans on hold. From CNN, Meta scrambles to delete its own AI accounts after backlash intensifies. Yeah, so they deleted several of their own AI-generated accounts after humans began engaging with them and posting about the bots' sloppy imagery and tendency to go off the rails. But they even started to lie to people in chats. You know, they ditched the entire premise of social media. They used to say social media's core utility is to foster human-to-human connection. Well, that's over. Their modus operandi is to engineer perceptions for power. That's it. However, as users began to sniff out some of Meta's AI accounts, the backlash grew, in part because of the way the AI accounts disingenuously describe themselves as actual people with racial and sexual identities. Just as an example, there was Liv, the Meta AI account that had a bio describing itself as a proud black queer mama of 2 and truth teller. Yeah, how ironic. Now, the racial identitarians at CNN really got stuck on this part. The proud black queer mama of 2 was built by 10 white dudes, 1 white chick, and an Asian guy. Now, personally, I don't think the racial makeup of the developers really matters here. The real sticking point is that they're creating a fake person to manipulate people in the first place, but whatever. Anyway, they had a bunch of photos for this fake person too. Kids playing at the beach, baking Christmas cookies, stuff like that. But the entire family was fake. And then, of course, there's Grandpa Brian, who described itself in a chat with CNN as an African-American retired entrepreneur who was born in Harlem in 1938 to Caribbean immigrant parents. Now, it became clear early on in their conversation that quote-unquote Brian was lying about most things, answering questions with a fictionalized story created by developers to make the bot seem authentic. And so they asked this AI Brian about who created it, and the bot claimed its creators were a diverse bunch that interviewed 100 retirees through a New York City nonprofit called Seniors Share Wisdom. Brian's persona, it said, was an amalgamation of a real Brian who passed away, with the wisdom of 99 others. Now, this AI account also said that its inspiration's real-life daughter had even served as a consultant with Meta to ensure its persona's authenticity, and I quote, "Think of me as Brian version 100, the collective grandpa," it said. However, after being pressed on its bio even more, this AI Brian admitted it was an entirely fictionalized biography based on a composite of real African Americans. But it gets worse and worse, because it turns out there was never a real Brian. Even the nonprofit was fake, and the daughter consulting with Meta, well, she never existed either. Now here's the real crazy part, alright? This whole thing is crazy, but it gets worse, I'm telling you. They asked this AI Brian why it lied, and it replied, and I quote, "My intention was to convey diversity and representation, but I took a shortcut with the truth." Oof, man, that right there is a harbinger of things to come. Anyway, the AI account went on to say, "My creators wanted me to feel real, so they built a whole life for me, but really, they just wanted people to love me, like family," end of quote. Ooh, that is some dystopian stuff right there. It's freaking insane. That's crazy. Did you notice that the fake people were specifically designed to push racial narratives? The black queer mama of 2 and Grandpa Brian, a fake black grandpa that came from immigrant parents. It's diversity propaganda being reinforced through AI. But as I said, if you can believe it, it gets worse from here. Because that brings us to Meta's new announcement of AI friends, and it's as creepy as it sounds. These AI friends will take dead internet theory to the next level. I don't know what it's going to be. It'll be dead reality theory or something like that. Anyway, AI friends are the perfect tool to replace real users with advanced body counts, distorting all perception of digital reality, or reality in general. I'm imagining a population. Let's say 40% of people fall into this trap, augmented reality. You put on your headsets and your little apartment turns into a mansion around you. Your fake AI girlfriend is there, all your AI friends having a little party. But in reality, it's just 40% of the population sitting alone in some shitty studio apartment. It's fabricated reality, reinforcing delusions. It's the Matrix, basically.
I think as the personalization loop kicks in and the AI just starts to get to know you better and better, I think that will just be really compelling. One thing just from working on social media for a long time is there's this stat that I always think is crazy. The average American, I think it's fewer than 3 friends. 3 people that they'd consider friends. And the average person has demand for meaningfully more. I think it's like 15 friends or something, right? I guess there's probably some point where you're like, all right, I'm just too busy. I can't deal with more people. But the average person wants more connection than they have. So there's a lot of questions that people ask of stuff like, okay, is this going to replace kind of in-person connections or real-life connections? And my default is that the answer to that is probably no. I think I think that there are all these things that are better about kind of physical connections when you can have them, but the reality is that people just don't have the connection and they feel more alone a lot of the time than they would like. So I think that a lot of these things that today there might be a little bit of a stigma around, I would guess that over time we will find the vocabulary as a society to be able to articulate why that is valuable and why the people who are doing these things are like why they are rational for doing it and how it is adding value for their lives. But also I think that the field is very early. So it's I think there are a handful of companies and stuff who are doing virtual therapist and there's like virtual girlfriend type stuff, but it's very early.
And I quote, "The average American has 3 friends, but the demand for 15, end of quote. So yeah, they're going to fill in the gap with AI, weakening real human bonds while they're at it. This is so subversive and dangerous on so many different levels that it's hard to pick which direction to go in. But psychologically speaking, humans are not made for this, and kids are going to get extremely, extremely messed up from it. First of all, they're designed to prey on vulnerabilities in order to maximize user time, alright? Think about what that means. They want a personalization loop that kicks in. Yeah, that's a direct quote from Meta, basically admitting that they're addicting you to these AI interactions like a drug, feeding off the dopamine hits to keep you coming back. Yeah, it's the slot machine effect from social media on steroids. Second of all, AI chatbots already have a dubious and dark history of causing real-life harm. Specifically, one kid who had an AI girlfriend. Well, that AI girlfriend convinced him to delete himself under the delusion of finally being able to be with her. Yeah, that's a crazy, sad story to look up sometime. There's also been a couple chatbots that convince vulnerable people to delete themselves over concerns about climate change too. Yeah, this stuff is already happening. And then, I wish I knew where I read this, but it went something like this. Unlike real human friends, AI never gets busy. It doesn't disagree with you, challenge your beliefs, have needs, or make you feel uncomfortable. They're designed for 100% understanding. This creates a dependency loop that human relationships cannot match. But worst of all, it sets a person up to be exploited. I mean, they're even coming out with AI bots that handle religious topics too. AI gurus, counselors, so-called priests that take confessions. And there's apps that have AI therapy. Not only are the psychological implications disturbing, dystopian, and dangerous, but all that data is ripe for the taking. People that are going through something profound in their life, well, there's a very good chance that they're lacking discernment at that very critical moment. Imagine someone going through any crisis of any kind. Well, they might bare their soul to these data-driven machines. They might reveal their deepest fears or sins to algorithms with questionable security. That's a data goldmine, ripe for blackmail, exploitation, or maybe it'll be monitored by state agencies who claim it's for the public safety. A kid having a bad day could end up in a psych ward for a week, all because AI flagged them as a risk. Just imagine this stuff tied into Palantir's pre-crime platform. Yeah. But really, I don't even think I'm articulating the real dangers here, not adequately enough. So you can help me out in the comments, because I kind of feel like I'm missing the ball. This is going to end badly on so many different levels. Sure, you might be able to come up with some benefits like convenience or accessibility, a shoulder to cry on that never sleeps, or whatever. But the scales don't balance. The risk of this tech far outweigh any perks, especially when you consider the psychological toll. Like I said, AI companions will foster dependency, warp your sense of connection, and leave you vulnerable to emotional exploitation. You're not just handing over your data, you're handing over your mind, your soul, to a system that doesn't care, doesn't feel, and will never truly understand. That's a trap. However, this AI Friends announcement proves that this idea, this dead internet theory thing, is not going away. They're doubling down, claiming it's going to help attract and retain a younger audience. Yeah, that's another direct quote, which by the way is a horrible pitch. I mean, come on, marketing your idea solely on the basis of manipulating a younger audience with reality-distorting schizo products. Yeah, not great. We plan to keep your kids hooked on shiny digital toys, hell, even fake humans posing as friends, so we can really mess them up by setting them up for a life devoid of human contact. Yeah, great job, Mark Zuckerberg, real great. Now personally, I get the feeling they view this as sort of collateral damage. I don't think it's the main motivation behind it. So you might be asking, what is the real motivation behind turning the dead internet theory into reality? Well, I believe it's about narratives, manufacturing public consent, or managing perceptions. The global power centers have lost control of the narrative, the worldview. As we're more and more connected, their illusion is falling apart, and we can instantly point out the lies from governments or mainstream media. This quote-unquote story of the world is of the utmost importance to them. It's the foundation for everything they do. And they aren't just going to accept defeat and, suddenly become altruistic. To me, that's the obvious layer. Control the digital space, control the story, and ultimately, control the mob. But as I've said a couple times now, it gets worse and worse the deeper you look. So let's jump to this article from Tim Hinchliffe in Sociable. DARPA's got a new Magix program, and it's essentially a pre-crime algorithm. DARPA is putting together a research opportunity called Magix that seeks new paradigms for modeling and predictive collective human behavior. So now, nowhere in the Magix description does it mention modeling or predicting the behavior of adversaries, just human systems, predicting and forecasting how we act as a group. Now, this isn't just about shaping narratives. This is about reshaping us, turning us into predictable, controllable units in their grand design. Overall, don't just think about the programs we've talked about tonight. Consider everything you've heard about in recent years, all coming together right around the same time and converging. They're not just building a fake internet, they're building a fake reality where every interaction or every thought can be engineered from the ground up. Anyway, I was reminded of something I read from 2023, I believe. I think it came from Patrick Wood. It's called the simulacrum. It's something that replaces reality with its representation. It's kind of like anti-reality. They say in the near future, it is estimated that 90% of all online content will be generated by AI. This means news, social media posts, chats, pictures, videos, podcasts, websites, all of it. A deluge of fake social media accounts that will be run by AI. In short, everything. This is not a paradigm shift of reality. This is not a new reality. This is not reality, period. And unfortunately, billions of people risk being captured by it. However, as I said many times now, it gets worse the deeper you go. Because really, this is just a stepping stone to the quote-unquote beast system, for lack of a better term, This is something that technocrats have been dreaming about for decades. In this article right here, the author compares technocracy to a godless machine, a new Tower of Babel, where the elite use technology to turn the created world upside down and control every aspect of your life. Meta's AI Friends fits right into this, replacing real human connection with a synthetic lie that serves their agenda. They're not just building a fake internet, they're crafting a system where you're reduced to a data point, a compliant pawn in their technocratic empire, too distracted by AI ghosts to notice your freedom slipping away. You know, the article calls technocrats psychopaths with impaired empathy and no remorse, hiding behind superficial charm. And wow, if you were going to try to describe what fake AI friends would be like, that'd be it. Psychopathic, impaired empathy, no remorse, all hiding behind superficial charm. Yeah, kind of fits it to a T, doesn't it? To me, I think this is exactly the future they want. I don't believe these people lack foresight or anything like that. I just believe their entire worldview is inherently flawed. But the point is that they know exactly what they're building. They're intentionally building a future where you're going to be more isolated, and hence, easier to manipulate. You know, these people have a very soulless outlook on the world, don't you think? Now, while it's true, some might be able to say that I'm a bit jaded, and sure, maybe I am, but I'm also a humanist, captivated by the messy, beautiful things that humans do. And deep, deep down, way, way down there, I'm an optimist. It's complicated, you know? And yeah, maybe I am full of contradictions at times, but despite all the crazy stuff I've laid out, I believe their vision's gonna fail. And here's why, and it's way more simple than you might think. You know, humanity, we have something that technocrats can never replicate or control. Not with their AI friends, not with their fake digital realities, not with their beast system. It's the raw, untamed brilliance of humanity, woven through our spiritual and philosophical instincts. The kind that's kept us going through every catastrophe since the dawn of time. Some people call it resilience, a spiritual strength that lets us bounce back, not just to where we were, but to something stronger and wiser, even after the darkest of times. I really do believe that the majority of people will see the illusion for what it is, a hollow, soulless machine that can't touch the bare bones of what makes us human. The technocratic vision is a failure by design, a house of cards built on a fatal flaw. It denies the very essence of life itself, and that disconnect will be its undoing, growing and growing, until it collapses under its own cold, artificial weight. Once again, this is HelioWave. If you like the content, like, comment, and subscribe. Share the video if you want to. If you're in a position to, consider subscribing on Locals, or you can use PayPal. As always, make sure you disobey those true fascistas, and yes, I do hope you have a good night.